Okay, I'm going to have to take off where I left off because my video cut out on me. But I'm going to put all these videos together in one video for everybody. I want to go back to where I was talking about the invention of the television. So I'm going to read here what this says. It says, television is a telecommunication medium that is used for transmitting and receiving moving images and sound. Television can transmit images that are monochrome, black and white, in color, or in 3 dimensions. The word television comes from the ancient Greek tele, meaning far, and Latin visio, meaning sight. So it means far sight. Television may also refer specifically to a television set, television program, or television transmission. First commercially available in a very crude form on the experimental basis in the late 1920s, then popularized and greatly improved form shortly after World War II, the television set has become commonplace in homes, businesses, and institutions, particularly as a vehicle for entertainment, advertising, and news. During the 1950s, television became the primary medium for molding public opinion. In the mid-1960s, color broadcasting and sales of color television sets surged in the U.S. and began in most other developed countries. Okay, so I just wanted to cover that. So I also wanted to bring up this movie again, The Giver. One thing I didn't mention was, in this society, in this movie, there was only one person who was allowed to have memories, was allowed to have feelings, and was allowed to read books. So basically, anyone in the society, they didn't even know what books were. They didn't know what memories were. They didn't know what feelings were. They were not allowed to marry. They were not, I guess they were allowed to marry, but they weren't allowed to have children. So all of their children were made through eugenics. So they basically created genetically modified babies. They created them in that way. They weren't formed in the womb. Women did not have, I guess they did, but they chose the women that were going to conceive these babies. But they were made genetically. So I will continue reading on with this, but where I left off. The Soviet Union was based on the Hegelian dialectic, as in all Marxist writing. The Soviets didn't give up their Hegelian reasoning when they supposedly stopped being a communist country. They merely changed the dialectical language to fit into the modern version of the Marxist thinking called humanitarianism. American author Steve Montgomery explores Moscow's adept use of the Hegelian dialectic in a glasnost Perestorchnica, a model Potkin village. How is it possible to consider a Hegelian dialectic argument? If the ideas, interpretations of experiences, and sources are all wrong, can a conclusion based on all these wrong premises be sound? The answer is no. 2 false premises do not make a sound conclusion, even if the argument follows the formula. 3, 4, 5, or 6 false premises do not all combine to make a conclusion sound. You must have at least one sound premise to reach a sound conclusion. Logical mathematical formulas are only the basis for deductive reasoning. Equally important is knowledge of semantics, or considering the meanings of the words used in the argument. Just because an argument fits the formula, it does not necessarily make the conclusion sound. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel knew this when he designed his dialectic. Hegel is an imperialist con artist who established the principles of dialectic, no reason. Hegel's dialectic has allowed globalists to lead simple, capable, free-born men and women back into the superstitious, racist, and unreasonable age of imperial global dominance. National governments represent people who are free from imperial controls over private property, trade, and production. National governments protect their workers from imperial slavery by protecting the workers' markets. But if you use Hegel's logical Marxism, the only way to protect people from slavery is to become the slave trader just for a while. Twisted logic is why cons are so successful, and Hegel twisted it in such a way as to be impenetrable. Like Hegel and Marx, the best street con knows his style has to use logic to bend and distort the story, and good cons weave their lies on logical mathematical progression. The fallacy is in the language, not in the math. Detective Philip Wart's 2001 article, Communist-Oriented Policing, is a nice explanation for dialectical materialism influenced on America. The communitarian purpose for the Hegelian dialectic. Hegel's theory is basically that mankind is merely a series of constant philosophical conflicts. Hegel was an idealist who believed that the highest state of mankind can only be attained through constant ideological conflict and resolution. The rules of the dialectic means mankind can only reach its highest spiritual consciousness through endless self-perpetuating struggle between ideals and the eventual synthesizing of all opposites. Hegel's dialectic taught all conflicts takes man to the next spiritual level, but in the final analysis, the ideology simply justifies conflict and endless war. It is also the reasoning behind using military power to export an ideological version of freedom and false democratic ideals. The reason we can call it the justification for modern conflicts and war with impunity is because no one can prove Hegel's theory is true. No matter how many new words they make up to define it, or how many new theories they come up with to give it validity, we can prove beyond a doubt that it is all false, and we can show the final equation in Hegel's dialectic is A, the your nation goes here, or says, this is what it says, it doesn't matter what nation, the USA system of political economy, the state-controlled world communism, or C, state-controlled global communitarianism. The Hegelian dialectic is the ridiculous idea that constant conflict and continual merging of opposite ideologies, as established by extreme right or left belief systems, will lead spiritual mankind into final perfection. Americans understood man's spiritual quest to be outside the realm of government control. Hegel's brilliance rests in his ability to confuse and obfuscate the true motives of the planners. And millions of people worldwide have been trying to make sense of why it doesn't work for over 150 years. But like the AA definition of insanity, the world keeps trying it over and over, expecting different results. When Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx based their communist theory on Hegel's theory of spiritual advancement via constant resolution of differences, they based the theory of communism on an unproven theory. While Darwin's theory of evolution is still being debated, there's absolutely no proof that societies are continually evolving. When Engels and Marx later based their communist theory on Lewis Henry Morgan's theory of anthropology in 1877, they again based the theory of communism on an unprovable theory. And when Amitio Etozani used Hegelian reasoning to base the communitarian network on a balance between A, rights, and B, responsibilities, he built the entire theory of C, communitarianism, on nothing but disproven and unprovable unscientific theories. Already gaining substantial ground against the Americans, British Marxism was bolstered when Charles Darwin published his theory of human evolution in 1859. Engels, according to the modern-day scholars, seized upon Darwin's theory to substantiate communism. When Marx read The Origin of Species, he wrote to Engels that although it is developed in a crude English style, this is the book which contains the basis in natural history for our view. They turned against what they saw as the social as opposed to the biological implications of Darwinism when they realized that it contained no support for their shibboleth of class oppression. Since they were slippery customers rather than scientists, they were not likely to relinquish their views just because something did not fit. It says here, see Marxism and Darwinism by Anton Pankow, 1912. In 1877, Lewis Henry Morgan published Ancient Society, or Researches in Life, Lines of Human Progress from Savagery through Barbarism to Civilization. Then the slippery Engels seized upon Morgan's work as the constantly evolving basis for the totally unsubstantiated theory of natural social evolution into utopian world communism. Hegel's formula has been so successful that in 2003 all U.S. domestic and foreign policy is dominated by communitarian thinking. The whole country is living under the new laws, and yet Americans most affected by impenetrable Hegelian laws never once heard the term used. Conclusion. The Hegelian dialectic presupposes the factual basis for the theory of social evolutionary principles, which coincidentally backed up Marx's Darwin theory of the social evolution of the species, even though it has been used for a century to create a vast new scientific community, including eugenics and social economics, does not adhere to the basis for all good scientific research, and appears to exist mainly to advance itself in all its sub-socio-scientific arms, as the more moral human science, as the more moral human appears, yeah, that's right, a more moral human science, sorry, I lost my place. To the ACL, this means the entire basis for the communitarian solution is based on a false premise, because there is no factual basis that social evolution of the species exists, based as it is only on Darwin and Marx's ideology of man's natural evolution towards a British version of utopia. The London Marxist platform in 1847 was to abolish private property. The American Revolution was based in private property rights. Marxist societies confiscate wealth and promise to redistribute it equally. America promised everyone they could keep and control what was the product of their own labor. Modern Marxist adherents openly claim they will rebuild the world, and they train activists, change agents, to openly support overthrowing the legitimate governments of the world. Since their inception, Marxist agent provocateurs can be linked to every anarchist assassination and student uprising that caused chaos to the established European civilization through the 18th and 19th centuries. Modern Americans have succumbed to the conspiracy theory label and will only listen to what the propaganda machines tell them. Now our people don't believe anyone other than maybe the Arab world hates our freedom. Most modern Americans will never know what went wrong with their great experiment in democracy. While the Marxist continuarian argument has not provided a shred of evidence to prove their utopian vision, and their synthesis does not match their own projected conclusions of world justice, we are convinced their argument does in fact substantiate our conclusion that the entire physiological dialectic argument is nothing but a brilliant ruse. We used to call it a cheap parlor trick until a responder to this page wondered how we could call it cheap when it's been so successful. And he perfectly designed diversion in the defeated British Empire's Hegelian Fabian metaphysical theophysical monopoly game. It's the most successful con job in the history of the modern world. For a well-presented Christian overview of the con, see American Babylon, Part 5, The Triumph of the Merchants by Peter Goodgame. The communitarian synthesis is the final silent move in a well-designed, quietly implemented plot to remake the world into colonies. To us, it does not Doesn't matter if there is some form of ancient religion that propels the plotters, nor does it really matter if it turns out they're aliens, as some suggest. The bottom line is the Hegelian dialectic sets up the scene for state intervention, confiscation, and redistribution in the U.S., and this is against our entire constitutional-based society. The Hegelian dialectic is not a conspiracy theory, because a conspiracy theory is a fraud. We've all been duped by global elitists who plan to take totalitarian control of all nations' people, poverty and produce. Communitarian plans exist in every corner of the world, and nobody at the local level will explain why there's no national legal avenue to withdraw from the UN's community development plans. Okay, basically I think what she's trying to say here when she says community development plans, anyone that has heard of Agenda 21 should really look this up. Hold on, I'm going to pause for a minute so I can get this book and show you this book you should actually pick up and read. Okay, this is Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21, written by Rosa Corey. She was just on Alex Jones yesterday talking about it. And basically, their plan is to try to get everybody into compact cities and abolish private property. And this is one of the reasons why we've been seeing a lot of land grabs going on lately. And Harry Reid has been involved in a lot of this, and a lot of the lawmakers are saying that they've put laws through that are still sitting on his desk that he refuses to sign and pass. So, like I said, not all. I don't know if all of this is true in this paper that I'm reading to you, but it seems to match up with what's going on with us, and I just wanted to cover this. I think I'm gonna try to put that trailer for that movie at the end of this video. I'll try to upload it to YouTube and see if it'll work. I don't know if it will. If not, I can post this. I will post it underneath in the comment section for everybody to look at. There's more here. If you want to check it out, I'll actually post this link underneath the video so that way you guys can go look through it. But there's a lot of information on this. Like I said at the beginning of it, these ladies who did this, see if you look at this, I don't know if you can see it very well, but at the top it's got all different kinds of parts to it that you can read. Alex Jones actually did a story on this in 2013 in August. I also printed it out to cover this because he's talked about it a lot. And I actually heard of this being brought up in mainstream media. I'm not sure. I think Fox covered it. It was brought up for like a little bit, but it's this is the story that they have, and I'll post this at the end of the video also in the comment section. The Hegelian Dialectic and its use in controlling modern society. This was by Kurt Nimmo, put out on August 8th, 2013. And it says, what exactly is the Hegelian dialectic? Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was a 19th century German philosopher who devised a particular dialectic or method of argument for resolving disagreements. His method of arriving at the truth by the exchange of logical arguments is a system of thought process still used to this day. To put it simply, the basis of the Hegelianism dictates that the human mind can't understand anything unless it can be split into two polar opposites: good, evil, right, wrong, left, right. For example, when people are talking about two political parties, Labor or Liberal, what they're actually referring to, without realizing it, is the thesis and the antithesis based off the Hegelian dialectic. The only real debate that occurs is just the minor differences between those two parties. Nothing is said or done about the issues that neither left or right is discussing. This in particular will become more apparent as the election draws near. Another form of the Hegelian dialectic is problem, reaction, solution. Most of us unwittingly fall victim to it all too often, and sadly, if we don't stop, we will continue to lose our free will and liberties. It has been widely used by our governments and corporations around the world. You could say that in terms of controlling the masses and society in general, its deployment has been an effective tool in keeping humanity in check. Almost all major events in history employ the Hegelian dialectic of problem, manufacture a crisis, or take advantage of one already in place in order to get the desired reaction of public outcry, whereby the public demands a solution which has been predetermined from the beginning. Now, that's why I brought up Ferguson. That's one of the reasons why I brought it up in the first part of my video, and I brought up what happened today with these state troopers. That's why I'm curious to see how long this is going to be discussed in the media, or whether they're just going to push it under the rug. Now, I'm going to read this part of the article, and this is like really sensitive because we just passed this day, not a couple days ago, but I'm going to read it just because it's part of the article, okay? A classic example is 9/11. Only when you break the left-right paradigm and come to the realization that the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan and the whole fake and not to mention contradictory war on terror was the desired outcome for the neoconservatives within the Bush administration and the whole military-industrial complex. They in fact stated in their own white papers the need for another catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. Now I'm going to stop here because I actually have heard or watched a video in which they actually have said this. Now, there has been, Rahm Emanuel has stated this before, and you can find it on YouTube. All you have to do is look it up. He said that governments should never let a crisis go to waste. He has said this. Here's a more current example of the Hegelian dialectic in use. In Australia, at present, both of the main political parties on the eve of the upcoming election on September 7th are discussing boat people, a derogatory term used to describe refugees and asylum seekers displaced by war or other hardships. I don't believe they constitute what you would call a crisis, as the statistics clearly show they aren't, but for the purpose of this example, our government is telling us they are a problem. The media is used to play up this problem in order to instigate a reaction debate in the public domain on how to tackle it. Both the opposition and ruling party offer their solution. Again, we see that the only real debate occurring is just the minor differences between those two parties. Nothing is said or done about the many other more important issues that neither left nor right is discussing. In order to avoid falling victim to the Hegelian dialectic from now on, you must remember the process involved. Anything a major problem or issue arises in society, think about who will gain or profit from it. Then remove yourself from the equation and take a step back to look at it from a third-party perspective. See the so-called problem, look at who is reacting, why and in what way, then look for who is offering up the solution. When you do this from now on, you'll quickly see the real truth instead of the false truth they want you to see. Okay. So now I want to bring up this movie again. I'm trying not to give the whole movie away. I don't want to ruin it for you, but they're living in this community. And there's only, like I said, there was only one man that was allowed to read books. He was the only one that was allowed to know what the true history was. One person. And as the children get older, they graduate and they're given certain duties. Well, this one kid had, kind of like in the movie Divergent, he had all the qualities of the group. So he was chosen to be the one who would know all this knowledge, and it would be moved from the old man, which is Jeff Bridges in the movie, to him. So he has to give all his knowledge to him, this young boy. And he finds out that if he leaves the community and goes to a certain point, that everything would shut off and everybody would get their memories back and their feelings. So if he crosses that border, it just, everybody sees color again, they can feel again, and everything like that. So it's real important that you guys see what's going on with this. A lot of people think, oh, you know, it's just, it's not real, it's not true, you know. Well, you have to ask yourself, why in the last 10 years have they been really pushing all these into the world, the change of society, utopian type movies? It's almost where they try to put the truth into a fiction-based scenario within the movies. But there's so many of them coming out, you know, it kind of makes you think. I just kind of wanted to go over this Hegelian dialectic thing, and so that way we could discuss it and we can talk about it, because a lot of people keep talking about the propaganda. Why do we keep falling for the propaganda? I say it all the time. We have to cross that mental border, and we have to stand on the outside of it, okay? If we already are awake, it's almost like how we describe it, you know. When you're awake and you see what's going on and you understand and you have all this knowledge in your head, then you go out into society and you see these people. You see them as if like you were involved in that movie, okay? You know, you have the knowledge, you've read the books, you see the truth, you know what it is. Then you go out amongst society around all these people who are ignorant. It doesn't mean they're stupid, it's just they don't know. And you see how they're walking around in this zombie type state, and they're regurgitating their programming, they're regurgitating what they're being told. Okay? And it's really scary, and it makes you just want to grab them and sit them down and explain all this stuff to them. And then you're going, would you just wake up? You need to wake up. I'm trying to tell you the truth. And they just look at you like you're crazy, right? Okay? When people try to say to you, wake up, or you're a sheep, or you're asleep, you need to wake up, that's what they mean when they try to explain stuff to you. Now, if they're trying to tell you something and they're giving you documentation and they're telling you things to look up, you might want to do that. Okay? You might want to take the time out of your day to actually look this stuff up before you call them a tinfoil hat wearer, because that is another programming scenario that they're using against you. So that way you're telling these people who are trying to tell you the truth that they're a tinfoil hat wearer. Now, I'm not talking about aliens. I'm talking about, well, you know, the brainwashing that's going on, the truth. I mean, it's out there. It's not that hard. All you have to do is look it up. Okay, there's several different sources for this kind of stuff. You can't just sit in front of Fox News, CNN, MSNBC and expect to get the truth, especially when they're owned by corporations and they're owned by the ones that want to get rid of our sovereignty and our freedoms. So this is one thing I wanted to cover. I know it's been a long video, but it needed to be talked about. So let me know what you think in the comment section on Facebook and on YouTube. Thanks.